Ladies and gentlemen, we're moving to the next session. The session is Healthy and Thriving Communities, Enhancing Quality of Cities Through Public Open Spaces. Our moderator, Mr. Marino Bonaiuto, and the speakers, Mr. Tomasz Pniewski and Jakub Lewkowicz, Mr. Ali Mangera, Mr. Martin Knuit, and Ms. Müge Ökan Özbek. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'm very happy of being here. Thank you, grateful for the invitation and for such an outstanding 3 days working on such an important and crucial themes that regards the whole humanity nowadays. Now, we have seen 3 days of wonderful presentation and very interesting topics dealing with the quality of our urban environments all over the world. And we have been going through the politics, the economics, the technological aspects and features of such a crucial topic. But I think that now we have this wonderful last session, session 10, which has exactly to do with the problem of the impact of all this that we've been listening during this day and the outcome at the individual and collective level. Let me just briefly pick up a few sentences or words that have been already deployed in the various sessions, 9 sessions before. We heard about sustainability is not only technology, but inclusivity and well-being. We have been hearing about the importance of monitoring human uses, or city as living labs, and how they can improve the participation of the inhabitants. The importance of tailoring, for example, public transport on the user needs, and to gain consensus from the inhabitants in order to change their own behavior, or to engage and empower people as drivers and participating in local communities and for proposal and feedback, social participation in nature-based solution, community of practice, focus on people for walkable cycling cities. All these topics actually prepared us to this last session. And I would stress how nature-based solutions have been already presented as important in their environmental features and how they can change the environmental quality of our cities, but they can improve and change our economics. And now here we are to listen more to the third level, which is the biopsychological and social impacts of nature-based solutions. I can just remember a few data from the literature. For example, using Nature Differential Vegetation Index, you can discover that, for example, if you have a higher degree of green vegetation in your neighborhood, you will decrease your expenditure in medical care. For example, in some samples in US, it's, you can save $400 per person in a year. Or from Danish massive epidemiological study, you can discover that if this index of vegetation is higher during the first 10 years of your life, then in adulthood you will have less probability of having mental, psychological, or psychiatric disturbances. Now, the way in which our cities, if well designed, can improve all these is by means of 3 main tracks, 3 main paths. One is mitigating, that is preventing, like the example I just offered. If you live in a better equipped in terms of natural provisions, which is not only vegetation, but it's also water, so green and blue spaces, then you will be preventing risks, body and mental risks. That's the first main channel. But the second one is also equally important, is restoring. So once you have been damaged by living in an urban environment, even simple damages like working, studying, you get fatigue, or you get bad mood, so negative impact at the cognitive level or negative impact at the emotional level. Well, spending half an hour or so in nature, for example, we have some studies in schools, when children have their break at school, half an hour in green rather than in concrete environment, they come back and they have a better cognitive performance once they are back in the classroom. So there is a way for nature to help us to recover. And the third path is generating new levels of functioning. So it's not only preventing, it's not only curing, but it's also improving. Even if we are already fine, if we are already in good health, still nature in urban environment can access us to even better level of functioning. And this can impact also our public attitudes and behavior in terms of sustainability. For example, the presence of nature in cities, especially if associated with environmental education, can change the mindset of people and can change the behavior toward more sustainable behavior, more respect for nature, more care for natural resources. Now, nature can also, and the impact of nature can be measured in very clear way. For example, nature is important that it has to be near the person, few minutes or few meters near. It has to be nice, so it has to be well kept, varied with biodiversity. And it has to be notable. You have to spend some time in nature. Some studies also can predict that there is an ideal dose of nature. For example, in 1 week for urban Western inhabitants, it's about 3 hours per week. So near, nice, and notable in terms of exposition. Well, we have a lot of interesting speakers that will let us understand how all this is possible if the urban environment is properly designed, is properly equipped with nature-based solution. And we can think also of nature-based intervention, because if we want to expose people to the positive impact of nature, the first thing is that we have to provide decent and good nature within the city. So I move to introduce the first speakers, which are actually two Polish colleagues, is Jakub Lewkowicz and Tomi Pniewski from their company, actually. So Jakub is a business development director, and Tomi is analyst and head of KI think tank. Since 2011, they've been developing this, but also before in Denmark and in Poland as well, and in other countries. And their title is Happy Cities, Happy People, Promoting Well-Being Through Urban Planning and Design. Please, the floor is yours.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Jakub Lewkowicz. I'm the partner and the business development director at Kurłowicz & Associates architectural studio in Poland. Can we move the page? Just a few words about our company. Through 35 years, we delivered more than around 4 million square meters of buildings only in Poland. Nearly 1 million square meters of the residential projects and affordable housing, and also nearly 1 million square meters of the other types of the projects. We are operating in 8 countries, and through these years we have the portfolio of the private projects for the private institutions like museums, like urban projects, railway tracks, let's say other, and the private sector, offices, shopping malls, and residential projects as well. The rest of the presentation will be followed by my colleague, but I would like you to remember from our presentation that everyone can design buildings. It's quite a simple thing, but not everyone can design the community, which is durable, help and support each other. This is the key for us as architects to create mainly the communities, not only the buildings.
I'll move to the, thank you. Right, so research shows that only about 10% of what affects how long we live it comes from our genes. The rest 90% comes from our environment and our lifestyle. So that's why it's extremely important to shape our environment, not only so that we live long, but also so that we live in happiness and prosperity. So I'm going to go through 7 points, and these 7 points focus on longevity and happiness, and they're also kind of an umbrella for the SDGs. So the first, downshift. It's really important to create stress-free environments that are something in between our work and life pattern. We think that it's really important to create spaces through which we could move naturally. That includes different types of spaces with slopes. We know that people who live in sloping terrains, actually live approximately 5 years longer than the average person living in flat terrain. We know that in moving naturally, every kilometer we cycle adds 42 cents to our society. So it's not only good for our health, but also good for society. Rituals and community. It's obviously good to bring people together, but rituals add that extra level of that extra importance to our life and that wider perspective. Regeneration, biodiversity, and water. We spoke a lot about embodied carbon emissions, but regeneration looks at the incalculable factors. And so we think that's really important to take into consideration. A lot of us spoke about water. Water affects about 90% of the SDGs. So it's really important to capture that water, especially during the kind of drought crisis we're having across the world. Plant-powered. We're really focusing on our diet for us to be healthy, so we should also focus on the materials we use. We know that healthy materials they have embodied carbon and also limit sick building syndrome. So if we have healthy materials, we feel healthy within these buildings. Sharing economy. There's this thing called the grandmother effect. When children grow up with an older generation, they actually live longer and live healthily. So we think it's really important to design multi-generational neighborhoods in which we could all function, and that also means that we mix several functions, and we're doing that in projects such as our student housing and hotels. And then the last, sense of purpose. Again, probably it's very incalculable, but it's one of those factors that really transforms our lives completely. If we design a beautiful concert hall, maybe a child who visits that place would want to become a musician in the future. Could I get the next slide? Sorry. Great. So with all the projects we're doing, we try to incorporate these 7 points. In the top right-hand corner, we're looking at several types of projects. We're also looking at projects such as parks, not only buildings. On the top right-hand corner, we even created a calendar for a park project, which looks at functions throughout the whole year of the project, not only the beautiful summer days, but also the winter days, so that we could use the full potential of the space. On the bottom left-hand corner, it's not really that visible, but we were designing a social science department for the University of Warsaw, where we were looking not only at the whole life of the building, whole life carbon, but also the 12 months of the academic year and the 24-hour cycle in order to get the full potential for the building inhabitants. Here we also have an image of the hands holding seeds. If we use healthy materials such as timber, we can imagine that within one hand we're holding seeds, which through time and energy and water, we could get trees, which we could then use to build our future buildings. So I'm just going to really quickly show 2 case studies on 3 slides. This is a city in Poland by the Baltic Sea, Gdynia. It's a port city similar to Baku. And the idea was we looked at 2 kind of urban tissues. One is the port, and the second is the modernist urban fabric. So on the left, we have the modernist urban fabric, very closed, unutilized courtyards, and roofs that generate heat island effect. On the right, we have the port, which is also isn't using its full benefits because we have piles of gravel and machinery that's aging. And so we think that it would be good, instead of selling off plot by plot and developing little bits of it, to have a full vision for these areas. Great. So on the left, we propose to open up the courtyards, to utilize the roofs, to bring even more life into these areas. And we think that could be done throughout time, and working with the people, with the people who live there. And in the port urban tissue, we think that it would be great to create a neighborhood which really inspires the rest of the city for the future. So we proposed a kind of culinary neighborhood, because food is such an important part of how we will be living in the future, and also to generate renewable energy through all the beauties of the sea ecology, such as tide, algae, and then in addition to that, we have aquaponic and hydroponic farming. And then we even proposed that it'd be nice to have a glass house where we could have mangroves to show the beauty of sea ecologies around the world, so that we're aware that that we can't live without these systems in the future. And the second case study, really quickly, it was to create a city for about 120,000 people, made up of 4 15-minute cities, each with its own characteristic. They're self-sufficient within themselves. They have their own dense heart, like similar to Baku, and they all have their own characteristic, which gives them their own identity. And together, they work together to create something very interesting. So we have one that's more tourist-based, one that's academic-based, one that's based on urban agriculture, and one that's business district. So this is just a segment of what, for example, the one based on urban agriculture could look like. So it has that dense heart, and then we have these more rational layouts that are surrounding that dense heart. And then the fragments in between, this kind of mosaic of green urban space, would be something that really enriches the whole urban grid. And then we can imagine that the spaces in between could have really beautiful qualities. And then this is how it could look all together. Yeah, so Polish architects designed almost 90 buildings in Baku. We hope to continue this legacy with the buildings we do in the future, and we hope to keep on collaborating and going forward with this. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you very much to Kurovic and Associates. And I think we already are in with the 2 good examples that at least show us the importance of variety and care in providing natural places, natural environments within the city, but also the importance of nearby, the idea that few minutes or immediate where you live, you need to have these natural provisions. Now, I think the second speaker will bring us another important features, or given the presentation title is Leveraging Artificial Intelligence in the redevelopment of Karabakh. And it's my pleasure to introduce Ali Manghera, who is a Manghera Evers Architects Director, and is an architect and engineer uniquely placed to understand the intricacies of collaborative design and wider stakeholder management. He worked at Skidmore, Owings and Merrill, Chicago, and Zadig, London, before co-founding MIAA, which has become a global award-winning design practice. He with an holistic vision, he lectured Hong Kong Design Study, Columbia University, New York, and Cambridge, and UK Design Council panel advisor for major infrastructure projects, focusing especially on sustainability. And I think the message he will introduce will be also human-centric architecture that requires empathy. So please, a big round of applause for him. Thank you.
Sorry, how do I go back? So thanks very much for the invitation. It's a pleasure to be here. One of the things that strikes me about being here, and why am I here, because I think Karabakh is a very special region, actually. It's an area which has a lot of memories, and it's very unusual compared to any other development, because you have history, you have culture, you have nostalgia. And from our point of view, I think the urban planning should be very, very sensitively handled. Something that invokes a meaning, and something which is very much connected to the landscape. With that in mind, we also, as an architectural practice working in many countries, we're looking at different technologies and different ways of doing master planning, design of buildings, and thinking about how technology can help us. And the question really is, what is the answer for Karabakh? How can we leverage technology? Is it a good idea? And how do we go back to the points that I've been talking about, which is about memory, about emotion, about empathy. So we used Zangelan as an exemplar for some of our testing, prototyping of ideas. And we started scripting. We're using some programs which help us to visualize through imagery. And I think this is quite important because Karabakh particularly has iconographic imagery about buildings which are, let's say, destroyed or half left in situ. I think this is a really interesting counterpoint. Then we prompted in the computer different images of what we'd like the Karabakh to be. That resulted in a kind of a series of inputs and outputs. We looked at creating a park environment in Karabakh and to see where that takes us as an exemplar. You know, sometimes you get outputs which you're not entirely comfortable with. Sometimes you get outputs which actually make you think. And we're using AI particularly to help us think, to kind of come up with other scenarios, brainstorming, so to speak, rather than ideas which are directly applicable. So these are just some outputs that we started getting from Karabakh. We looked again at some of the imagery that we'd like to actually invoke. How do you create places? How do you create a new type of landscape which is much more about learning, about human-centric design? That took us to kind of a various evolution of the AI model, giving us, again, different outputs, which then led us to going backwards. So now we're unpicking the computational analysis and having to go back through a manual process, looking to see what we would like to do in Karabakh if we actually were not using computational design. So from our point of view, this idea of stitching back the fabric, stitching back the landscape became quite evocative. Taking the fragments of the landscape, bringing it together again, bringing some of the traditions that are quite evident in, not just in Karabakh, but in Azerbaijan in terms of various cottage industries, carpet weaving, that kind of metaphor was useful for us. That took us to a new kind of hybrid model where we took this idea of landscape and created a new vision, connected very much to the landscape of Karabakh, but particularly to Zangelan, accommodating the riverfront and creating new places for people to interact with. Also connecting with other opportunity corridors within the development. And then creating within that a series of activities that we thought would be quite useful. I mean, the idea here is not to create architecture, so to speak, is to create a process, a thought process, and also to create moments. Because I think for us, Karabakh is not about creating a rigid master plan. It's not about creating or recreating an urban grid, because I think that's too easy and it's too obvious and it's something that's been done 60 years ago. We need to be much more sensitive to the landscape and much more sensitive to what's actually happening. On the right-hand side, you see the kind of the buildings that I think are being proposed, and on the left is an idea of what the landscape might be. Using AI as assisted AI design for Zengaland. So we looked at different modes. These are different outputs that actually we're not drawing these by hand. These are just computational outputs to see what kind of strategies the computer then comes up with through its own kind of thinking. But of course, it's being prompted by us, and we are kind of putting in our different inputs to see where that leads to. And then that then generates a series of ideas, some of which are taken forward. And then that process is then visually tuned to see how we can then refine the approach and actually come up with more radical solutions as well. So from our point of view, Karabakh is an incredible opportunity to do a new kind of urbanism. And why am I saying that? We're now in 2023. We've probably forgotten that there was a pandemic in 2019 and we were stuck in our houses. There was a moment where, I would say last year, the year before, where we were very much thinking about landscape, about outdoor space. And I think the idea of creating a new type of urbanism with a very deep connection with the landscape, with agriculture, is something that Karabakh could actually achieve. And that means moving away from the rigidity of the grid, of the urban grid, and trying something quite radically different. That's not to say that these ideas are the solutions. These are just us experimenting and testing ideas. Here you see how we might then develop the park, and how sorry, I think it's supposed to play an animation, but I'm not sure it does. Not playing animation. Okay. Oh, there you go. Oops, is it playing? So you can do these incredible things. You can create these kind of endless vistas through this computational design process. And for us, this is kind of a new way of working in future, and how you can then generate ideas for buildings, and how beyond Karabakh we're using the idea of AI for other projects. So this is the theatre building that we're doing currently, which is kind of like a hybrid between traditional design and computational design, which we're kind of now developing as an idea. Here you see also we develop 3D modeling and also animations using the same tools. So it's a whole kind of new public realm, as it were. And then going back to the traditional idea and where we think there is opportunity in Karabakh to do something much more interesting than actually currently is projected in some parts of Karabakh. Basically, to understand what are the existing, what is the legacy of war? What is post-war construction like? How do you rebuild memories? And what is the opportunity? And for us, the opportunity is not about building repetitive row houses. And I understand the rationale for trying to provide something quick and fast in terms of output. But for us, the idea is much more about building something which is very much, it looks like it should be there. It's always been there. But also how it can kind of connect with the history of Karabakh. So these are just some ideas of moving back away from computational design and how that might be achieved. So that's kind of our thesis, as it were, a mix of kind of computational design and then going back to traditional design. I think the problem for us at the moment is computational design may be a quick way of generating ideas, but at this moment in time doesn't quite have a heart, doesn't quite have an approach which has empathy. And I think maybe that will come in future, but at this moment in time, I think we're using it just as a tool. But I think in terms of Karabakh, it's very, very important to have empathy and to really understand the context in which projects are being done.
Well, thank you very much. I must say that personally, as an Italian and as a social and environmental psychologist, I really feel very sympathetic to the content that Ali Manguera just presented and the importance of understanding that we have powerful models that works across culture based on nature-based solution, nature-based intervention, etc. But we have to add that sensitivity that allows us to decline that specific general working model within the local specificity. So thank you very much for having stressed this aspect. And I think this will bring us very well to the next speaker, Martin Knuit, from the Netherlands, director of OCRA, founding partner of OCRA, involved in design of complex urban and landscape development projects with socially relevant themes, such as design for all and climate resilient design, and themes like nature-based urban and landscape development, healthy cities, interrelated with social, economic, and ecological sustainability. He will offer a presentation to us with the title Healthy Cities, Creating Better Cities for Tomorrow, where he should also stress a holistic approach to the landscape-based urbanism with vibrancy and inclusiveness of the public realm. Thank you. Please.
Thank you for the invitation, and thank you to be here. I'm happy to be here and present something on healthy cities. And for us, it's an important issue because at this moment... Yeah? Okay, thank you. At this moment, more than half of the people live in cities. And if we can't make healthy cities, then half of the people are not living in the right conditions. For us, we work with a model, and the model is about creating healthy communities, healthy people, and healthy environments. And this is a holistic approach, because if you want to have healthy people, then at least the city also needs to be in an environment that is appealing and working in the right direction. We have 4 topics that are relevant. First of all, healthy urban living, which means that people should be in the possibility to live and act in a healthy way, moving from your home to your work, or moving around, having sports, etc. The second one is climate adaptive, and that means that we have to make cities that are offering the right solutions for heat mitigation, and also offering the right solutions for water and during flash floods and drought. The third one, it was already present at the previous session, is about multimodal mobility and changing and making the shift from vehicular movement to pedestrian movement. And the last one is about vibrant public areas. Actually, we are not making the cities for nature, we're making the cities for people. So places should be active during different moments of the day, different moments of the week, and have different opportunities during the year. I present first an example where this integrated approach is applied in Cape Town on the foreshore. That's actually the place where normally the city would meet the water, but here the city is disconnected by a freeway in the 1960s. And in the 60s, we had different models on our cities. We thought we can make everything loose from the ground, loose from the previous history, and also create whatever we want in infrastructure. So there's a big highway constructed, but as you can see, it was never finished. And imagine that that's happening. It's not only solving, creating an infrastructure problem, but it's also creating the problem that once the person who drives on the highway drives with a certain expectation, and then it ends up with just a traffic junction where there's a traffic jam. So the system has a weakest point, and the weakest point is actually determining the quality of the chain, also for infrastructure. In RD, we thought, okay, the existing situation is actually this freeway is blocking the city from from the sea. And what we should do is actually we should lift the area, create underground parking, create a different mobility system, and start to build up. So the building program allows actually the change in urban situation. And building program is a catalyst, of course, for economic investment. But when we do it, we should start thinking from the landscape. That seems odd in a city that's already built up for decades and for centuries. But if we do that, and we create and reinvent the landscape unities that are green colored here, then we can create the robust green infrastructures that allow to densify some certain areas, but also to free up places for people and for nature. And if you combine it with the green infrastructure and the blue infrastructure, then suddenly the rivers get also the quality that they deserve. So it is actually first the layer about the infrastructure, then the podium, the park, and at last, the built form. Thinking about this example, far away from here, and where this holistic approach is applied, we now move to Agdam. Agdam, as we know it at this moment, will be reconstructed. And the reconstruction should create a bright future for people. If we create a city that is really healthy and really prosperous, then we should actually embrace the green spaces. We were happy to win the competition for the Agdam Central Park. And it's nice that the park will be one of the first parts that will be reconstructed. Because people could say, why not the buildings? But if we can create a real right park, you create already the asset for people, and that they can see how the city can change and how the city will be changed. The park has its concept that is relatively simple to be said in 4 layers. One of the most important things is actually that there are old lines. Every landscape has its history. Even in a city where everything is destroyed, there is an original pattern, and people have moved there, people have lived there, people have loved there. And those lines are important because they are the traces from the past that we never should forget. These are the bases, so these are lines of movement, but also the line of the mosque that is still there and determines the direction. The second one is the remains. Of course, we should not go back into the history as it was, but we should at one moment create also out of the ruins something new, something modern, and that is referring to what has happened, because we all have a memory, and we should cherish that memory. The third layer is about the greening, and it goes from urban to green. And the fourth layer is the water line, the water and fire line that actually creates magic, because places need magic. If we look at the image, then the park will be created with different types of planting, going from the cultural area to the natural area. And we see it as it is, there's an ecologic sequence as well. So this landscape that will be created has its urbanity, but also it will provide the places for habitats from urban to natural. And if you combine that with water conditions and the right type of planting, you get something that is richer than just a normal park. This is one of our images on urban biotopes. And this is how we should work with the plantation and the soil. This urban biotope idea means that we will have 7 layers of planting: large trees, smaller trees, shrubs, understory, and something on the ground. And this accommodates the right conditions for several animals, small animals, of course. And it creates the right conditions to capture the water, to infiltrate it, and use it for the planting, that it will not evaporate. We think that these natural systems can help future cities and create nature-based solutions for parks, for people, and for all. Thank you.
Thanks a lot to the last speaker as well. I think we have another beautiful example of how the care that we put in creating our new urban spaces or renovating the existing ones can have strategic importance basically in building human beings. That's the basic issues, that's the basic argument, that the way the space is built will finally create the way the human beings will perceive the environment, will act in the environment, and this by time, repeatedly by time, will be their own identities. So that's a crucial reasoning that we have to take into account whenever we take decision about the urban environments or the environment and the places. I'm glad that we have a fourth speaker, which is Müge Özkan Özbek from Turkey, from Sinan Fine Arts, Mimar Sinan Fine Arts University in Istanbul. She graduated from Edith Technical University, Department of Architecture, with a master and doctorate at the same university where she works now, where she taught, she's teaching several courses, and she is also consultant partner in an architectural office. Well, she will speak about, again, the topic I was just mentioning, people identity meanings within the environment and the urban design, and how urban design is a specialty in establishing such relationship for sustainability and for human beings. So, thank you very much, and the floor is yours.
Hello, everyone. As far as I know, I'm the last presenter, so, and I believe you must be all hungry. I will try to keep it short and brief. The reason I chose this title, maybe you all know a book called The New Brave World of Aldous Huxley, first printed in 1932, a kind of dystopic novel describing a future generation in the 26th century. The individualism is the main concept. There is no one can get socialized. Everyone has to be alone. Even the physically relations are banned. If you get sick, then the system destroys you, erases you, and there is no mention concept called public. So if Huxley would live and see the 21st century, he would think I wouldn't go so far. So let's begin. Okay. I want to talk about the heritage of the cities. There is this modern movement in the beginning of the 20th century, full of our historical cities were full of their cultural bases, monuments, and their identical buildings. But this modern movement actually created marvelous buildings in architectural scale, but we still follow their footsteps. But when it comes to urban scale, they give us their new heritage as this model look. You know, they basically try to create cities by collecting all the buildings and putting them into a kind of grid structure. And this is what we mostly see in our cities now. On the right bottom, you can see some images from my homeland, Turkey. I don't know which city is which, because they're all the same, and the solid void balance doesn't mean anything. They're nothing but lost spaces. And the very left bottom, you can see some building demolition. That's an iconic photo from 1954. It's a kind of declaration of the death of modern movement. And then the postmodern era started, and they declared that, yes, modernism has created beautiful architecture, but you forgot something about the urban scale, human being. And there are, as you all know, urbanization principles that every city should have, like walkability, connectivity, mixed use and density, and so go on. I want to go a little bit down in scale with urban design, what connects architecture and urban planning. The character is the main issue, continuity and closeness, public spaces, and movement, legibility, diversity, and adaptability. So, urban public space. When we think about space, I mean open space, there are types. I mean, when you go to Europe, and then they're all full of history, and there is this formal kind of Baroque city urban squares that you know, and there when you come a bit further, like after 19th century and 20th century squares like in New York, there's the general squares that we get used to. These are all for these socializing spaces. But now, today, on the contrary to Azerbaijan, in my country or in Europe, there are not so many places to recreate these huge, big public spaces. And also the sources, we need to think a kind of updated urban design, what we call as adaptive one. So we have to design places by using it more functional. So overall, if you want to design better places for better communities, the economic dynamism of the country is the crucial issue, with the help of government efficiency and the infrastructure. And today's main problem is the resilience, because we are now risk societies with dealing with natural risks like earthquake, fire, floods, and also with social risks, wars, human migration, and so on. And we should think that the public spaces, not just for socializing, or also kind of saved places that serve for the public services and easily accessible to our homes and very well designed. Let's go. So that's why we say adaptive reuse. I want to give you two examples briefly, maybe you know, which are my favorites. This is a museum in Denmark, and it's a dry dock, which was abandoned places and very risky area actually. And this is redesigned and as the adaptive reuse rules into a beautiful museum. And that's why we don't say recycling anymore. Think upcycling. This is the old and new images of that place. It's a very award-winning architectural building and public space. I want to give you another example. I believe that most of the architects and planners know this example very well. This is High Line project in New York. That's the brilliant example of this. It's a public park built on a historical train line, and it rises above the street of Manhattan's west side. It was saved from demolition by neighborhood residents and the city of New York. The High Line opened in 2009 as a hybrid public space. And I want to show you its before and after photos. It's this train line just a kind of triggered the area. You don't have to overall design a space to make it more better spaces. You just, a small touch just triggers the rest of the place. I want you to look around the buildings where it's used to be insecure, a kind of slum areas. Now it's one of the most luxury and most useful places. And that's why while we are designing, we need to show respect to community and their identity. We are all together, look alike, but when we come along more tense, we know from all over the world, we have cultural differences, religional differences. The way we use, the way we behave can show differences. So that means our spaces, our cities should reflect our identities. So human first design philosophy at its core has to be done, and socially interactive neighborhoods contribute better places. So build form, cellular arrangements, street layouts, visual clues, landmarks with the people that interact. We are all together and we should think about human all the time. Thank you.
Well, I'm very happy that Müge brought this highline example, which I love very much. And I may add that is a beautiful example of how we don't need to destroy. Sometimes we can just simply reuse in a different way, in a better way, what we have. And also that's a beautiful example because as far as I know, it was created also with a bottom-up interest from the local population. So thank you very much for bringing this up. And I have a bad news and a good news for you. Bad news, no time for question and answer, I'm sorry. But good news is that we have another speaker, the very last speaker, so it's not Müge, but we welcome the chairman of the Association of Urbanists from Kazakhstan, Q88, an exclusive speaker at NUFA. It's a public association, and the chairman is Yerlan Okunov. So please, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Добрый день, уважаемые коллеги. Позвольте поприветствовать и поблагодарить организаторов данного форума за его организацию на столь высоком уровне. Открытие мероприятия главой государства еще раз подчеркивает, что повестка развития городов одна из ключевых для этой страны и есть высокое осознание и понимание того, что это один из драйверов экономического роста. Также хотелось бы поблагодарить UN Habitat за продвижение повестки Resilient City, Sustainable City, Green Economy City. И именно эти ключевые концепции, которые провозглашают мэры городов по всему миру, мы как организация Q88 продвигаем в нашей стране, в Казахстане. Q – это Кала, Казахстан. На нашем языке это означает Казахстан, либо город. 88 – это количество городов нашей страны. Все эти концепции, о которых было озвучено и о которых говорили сегодня, они новые, их провозглашают разные аналогичные организации по всему миру. И наша организация несколько лет назад взяла концепцию именно одной из них, это C40. Основная задача – это просветительская миссия развивать и продвигать эти концепции в нашей стране, как в стране с большим наследием постсоветской стране, с большим наследием концепции «город для производств», нежели города для людей. Мы развиваем наши концепции, продвигаем их, понимая, осознавая, что ключевым внешним фактором воздействия является миграция, количество людей в городах будет расти, и для нашей страны в цифрах это выражается прирост 2,3% ежегодно, это почти 250 тысяч человек в нашей стране, где 20 миллионов человек появляются дополнительно в городах. Для нашей страны это +1 город каждый год. Если перевести его на язык цифр, что мы объясняем каждому мэру нашей страны, то это $200 миллионов только содержание такого города, который появляется каждый год. Это более $2,5 миллиардов на его создание всей инфраструктуры, начиная от освещения, заканчивая школами и больницами. Это почти $3,5 миллиарда на создание жилого фонда. В совокупности речь идет о 6 миллиардах долларов, что сопоставимо 1/6 бюджета нашей страны. То есть давление на наши города составляет каждый год почти 20, от 15 до 20%. За 10 лет это давление сопоставимо с 15, увеличивается и составляет 1,5 бюджета нашей страны. То есть этот шарик раздувается, и если не использовать научные подходы, о которых говорили сегодня, которые продвигают такие организации, как UN, Habitat, то неизбежно будут проблемы, и рано или поздно мы знаем, что такое, когда надувается воздушный шар. Вторые две кейсы, которые мы важны, и мы объясняем и продвигаем в наших городах, как, еще раз подчеркиваю, постсоветских пространствах, что экономика в свое время, мы помним, постсоветских стран не выдержала колоссального давления и гигантомании. В определенной степени мы называем его сталинским ампиром, когда здания и сооружения строились, и человек чувствовал себя в них некомфортно. Мы помним, что и в Древнем Риме, в Греции эпоха заката всех городов начиналась с того момента, когда строили что-то огромное и гигантское. Это давило на экономику. И в этой связи применение научных подходов во всех отраслях развития города – это то, что мы пытаемся реализовать в нашей стране. Первое, мы меняем парадигму в транспортной сфере. К сожалению, долгие годы парадигма проектирования дорог ориентирована была на повышение пропускной способности автомобилей. Сегодня ключевым аспектом, который мы стремимся и который реализовываем в наших ПСД, это сокращение времени пути передвижения на транспорте. Это индикатор, один из ключевых индикаторов при разработке ПСД. Мы знаем такие примеры, как Йоханнесбург, когда запустили коридор свободы, и целью проекта было сокращение времени пути от одной части города до другой с 3 часов до получаса. Успешный пример того, куда мы стремимся, это кейс сравнения Берлина и Атланты, когда при численности населения 5,6 миллионов человек и в том городе перемещение в пути в Атланте занимает в 6 раз больше, чем в Берлине. Полчаса в Берлине и 6 часов в Атланте. И, конечно, это влияет на счастье и комфорт горожан. Это то, что мы продвигаем в наших проектах в нашей стране. Еще одним аспектом, конечно, является это освещение. Речь идет не просто о том, чтобы осветить и сделать безопасными наши улицы, но применить энергоэффективный подход. Но речь идет еще и о том, чтобы применить комфортное для жителей освещение. Перейти не просто от ламп накаливания на LED, но перевести их с холодного белого освещения на теплый белый цвет, который является очень комфортным. Мы видим его в Баку, мы видим его в Дубаях, в Абу-Даби, который успокаивает. Не тот холодный белый цвет, который вызывает возбуждение, как в операционной, в больнице. Еще одним кейсом является последние несколько лет, это продвижение концепции зеленого города, переход от посадки однолетних растений в сторону многолетних растений, которые не требуют постоянного ухода, которые в течение 3 лет для любого муниципалитета экономически уже оправданы, отбиваются, и через 3 года начинается абсолютная экономия на затратах. Наглядным примером того, как следует переходить на дружелюбные города, концепцию Livable Cities, это переход от линейности парков, это опять же наследие, наверное, советской эпохи, в сторону парков, где абсолютно отсутствует какое-либо антропогенное воздействие. Это пример сравнения парков в Шымкенте и в Лондоне, когда мы знаем, что человек на психологическом уровне чувствует себя комфортно, приходя и не видя ничего, где связано с антропогенным воздействием, будь то цемент, бетон или железная кованая конструкция. Еще также одновременно мы стремимся избавиться от засилия аттракционов в наших парках, вынести их за город. Мы знаем, что концепция того же Диснейленда была ориентирована вытянуть на выходных людей из города, а не притянуть их в наши центральные части города. Уход автомобилецентричности – это то, как мы сегодня создаем комфортные пространства в наших городах. И наглядный пример этого является площадь Ватарау, которая создана и спроектирована была для парадов, марша военной техники. Стремимся в сторону концепта использования наших площадей 24/7, чтобы они были местом формирования культурного кода города, где люди присутствуют постоянно. изменение и создание инклюзивной среды не только для детей в возрасте до 5 лет, но и в наших дворах создание для всех возрастов, включая пожилой возраст, это то, что сегодня строятся тысячи различных спортивных рекреационных пространств для всех возрастов, будь то пожилого возраста, либо среднего возраста, и это дает свои результаты. Это кейс был сравнение того, как мы сравниваем, что мы имеем и куда мы стремимся. Еще одной концепцией является создание унифицированных для городов пространств, чтобы не делить их на жилые комплексы и кварталы, и люди чувствовали себя сегрегированными, как город в городе, а создавать единые пространства по опыту многих европейских проектов городов. Разработка дизайн-кода для каждого города – это тот вызов, который мы имеем сегодня, над ним идет работа, и он позволяет создать унифицированную, комфортную городскую среду с Ну и мы видим, что за последние несколько лет нам это удалось. Реализованы сотни, можно сказать, по всей стране проектов, по всей стране, когда создается комфортная среда при минимальных затратах и при этом максимальном эффекте. Мой любимый кейс – это подмостовое пространство. После того, как мы рекомендовали в нашей столице использовать его как воркаут-площадка, спонсорские затраты всего несколько сот тысяч долларов позволили создать инфраструктуру, которая в правильном месте притягивает несколько тысяч человек для занятия здоровым образом жизни. При этом, если мы сравниваем с зданиями, сооружениями, которые тратятся иногда и порой до 100 миллионов долларов, какие-либо спортивные объекты, и в которых посещают всего несколько сот человек, мы видим, насколько несопоставимы разница. И наша задача показать муниципалитету, в каком месте, на каких транспортных потоках лучше привести какие инвестиции, которые дадут при минимальных затратах максимальный эффект. Основная задача – это вовлечь общество, создать и заполнить их временной лимит. Еще одна площадка, на которой дети в Шымкенте сегодня при затратах 300 тысяч долларов, 3000 детей ежегодно используют и занимаются здоровым образом жизни. Ну и все эти вещи мы делаем в рамках концепции для городов, которые мы как общественная организация безвозмездно передаем городам, показываем при помощи ГИС-аналитики, что и где можно сделать и как трансформировать. Это дает свои эффекты, города активно их используют. И мы понимаем, что самое главное все-таки это люди и изменение сознания, мышления людей, если мы хотим перейти от советской периметральной застройки в современным, комфортным городам для людей. Поэтому два мировых бестселлера – это Джанат Садихан «Битва за города» и Монтгомери «Счастливый город» по трансформации мировых брендов, как Богота и Нью-Йорк, были переведены нами на казахский язык, распространены во всех школах нашей страны. И для специалистов мы совместно с зарубежными партнерами, с Дом РФ, мы переадаптировали стандарты городской застройки как мультидисциплинарное пособие для всех мэров городов, архитекторов, транспортников, специалистов по озеленению и благоустройству. И сегодня внедряем курсы по переобучению наших с вами коллег. Спасибо за внимание.
Thank you to Elena Oltonova, and I think this is really the end of the last session, and I will give the floor back to the organization. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. So it was the last session, and as we completed all the sessions of the National Urban Forum, as I mentioned earlier, the declared actions of our forum is on the website nofa.us, and I would like to bring to your attention the declared actions. We, the participants of the second Azerbaijan National Urban Forum, representing international, national, and local governments, parliamentarians, civil society, older persons, women, youth, children, persons with disabilities, grassroots groups, and local communities, private sector, foundations and philanthropists, international and regional organizations, academia, professionals, and other relevant stakeholders convened in the cities of Zangilan and Baku to debate on and seek the harmonization of local and national contributions towards achieving sustainable urbanization in the Republic of Azerbaijan, with a particular emphasis on the localization of the new urban agenda as a catalyst for economic development, addressing inequalities, enhancing urban resilience, advancing climate action, and fostering peace building, thereby harnessing the full potential of sustainable development. We call, therefore, for deployment of all efforts, means, and resources to ensure that all inhabitants of present and future generations, without discrimination of any kind, are able to access just, safe, healthy, accessible, affordable, resilient, and sustainable cities and human settlements that can provide prosperity and quality of life for all. We acknowledge the valuable occasion of observing Urban October as a platform to spur awareness about sustainable urbanization in the spirit of the 2023 theme, Resilient Urban Economies, Cities as Drivers of Growth and Recovery. This recognition extends to NUFA 2, the multi-stakeholder platform that has brought together between 29 September and 1 October 2023 more than 500 key decision makers and urban actors and practitioners from 53 countries around the world in support of evidence-based planning and decision-making for a well-balanced, resilient and inclusive urban development. In our discussions on urban recovery initiatives, we stress the importance of a comprehensive whole-of-government approach and the active involvement of society and in partnership with the private sector and academia to achieve the ambitious goals of the 2030 Sustainable Development Agenda and NUA, New Urban Agenda. We believe that sound and well-balanced urban governance shall ensure continuous dialogue among different levels of government, non-governmental organizations, and other stakeholders to achieve cross-sectoral coordination, transparency, and accountability. We advocate for continuous capacity building and actively seek the exchange of creative solutions and international innovative practices which are essential to foster the necessary shift in mindset, promoting the development of neighborhood-friendly, peaceful, and inclusive spaces that are responsive to age and gender considerations, thereby ensuring meaningful engagement at all levels. We recognize the crucial role played by UN Habitat in advocating for sustainable urban communities in the country, understanding their fundamental significance in tackling the numerous challenges presented by the rapidly evolving global sustainable development agenda, which must be implemented at the local level. We express full confidence in leadership and dedication of UN Habitat's Executive Director to expedite the localization of the Sustainable Development Goals with a specific emphasis on SDG 11 to address a wide spectrum of interconnected development challenges. We do emphasize the utmost importance of demining for rebuilding safe, prosperous, inclusive, and resilient neighborhoods in the Republic of Azerbaijan in support of implementing the Azerbaijan 2030 national priorities for socio-economic development. This declaration draws inspiration from NUFA 1 conducted in 2022 and the recent 2023 SDG Summit in New York, which underscored the need for renewed vigor and accelerated efforts to achieve the SDGs. We thank our international partners and participants for sharing their valuable experiences and best practices, enhancing our capacity to promote more ambitious engagement by the Republic of Azerbaijan and align our endeavors for COP28 in Dubai, United Arab Emirates, later this year. We pledge to work diligently to ensure a robust representation of the Republic of Azerbaijan at World Urban Forum 12 in Cairo, Egypt, in 2024, next year, sustaining our active involvement. We would like to extend our appreciation to the government of Azerbaijan, to the State Committee on Urban Planning and Architecture, the Office of the Special Representative Institution of the President of the Republic of Azerbaijan, the cities of Zangilan and Baku for hosting NUFA 2, as well as UN Habitat for supporting the convening of the forum. Thank you. This is the declaring actions. We already took into account some comments. Nevertheless, until end of the day, feel free if you have any comments regarding the declared actions, and by the end of the day, these actions will be published as final. Thank you very much, and for closing remarks, I would like to invite the chairman of the State Committee on Urban Planning and Architecture, Mr. Anar Guliev.
Dear friends, it's always challenging to be the last person before lunch, but I don't want to miss this opportunity to thank each of you once again. It was a lovely journey which started 3 days ago in beautiful green city of Zengilan, and next 2 days in Baku. I think all 3 days were full of great ideas, examples of urban planning, urban regeneration. During these days, we had also very fruitful discussions on ministerial level, also within the regional context with my colleagues from Turkic states. And I'm sure each of you made some notes from presentations given all these days. I personally made a lot of them. So we will continue this project. Urban Week in Azerbaijan also continues. Tomorrow we will have another important event, celebration of the World Habitat Day in our country, in our beautiful capital, Baku. We would love to see each of you tomorrow here in this place again for that purpose. And Urban October, today on the 1st of October, now I think officially started. We're proud to be home for this initiative, for this start. And I believe in all of your countries, different types of events, initiatives, discussions around efficient urban planning will help each of us. We're presenting different sectors. I'm happy that we have here all sectors presented, public sector, private sector, designers, scientists. It's great that we have so many of you from so many countries this year. As it was mentioned, more than 50 countries were presented here. We're really very proud to be home for this level of discussions. And we, as I said, will continue our efforts. It seems like project now, I mean, it's not just, it will be difficult for us to keep calling it national forum considering the level of representation. So we will think about it during the year, we will make our preparation, and probably it will grow to something at least regional. Thank you again for being with us all these days, and we're looking forward to see you again next year during the Urban October. Thank you.